there. It's your host. That's right, Jessica Koch. We are back again with another Profound Professionals. We are an interview series that has been running, I still can't believe it, almost 8 years now. We reach all kinds of industry experts from all over the world. They help improve your personal life. They help you grow your business. And we just love doing it. We are grateful for your watching. We're grateful that you share, that you play along, that you add your input in the comments. Today, we have a guest. He is unconventional. We have Unconventional Dan, who is unconventional. And we're going to learn all about what does that even mean very soon. So welcome, Dan.
Thanks for having me on.
Where are you from?
I am from the Seattle area.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Very nice. We had someone from Australia yesterday, someone from Russia the day before that.
Okay.
And now we're back to the good old US of A. So we're happy to have you. So unconventional, I'm pretty sure that's not an official job, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. What do I know? So tell us, what was your journey here, and how do you serve?
Yeah, I was, if you can imagine the kid growing up scheming on business ideas, that was me as a kid. So my lovely parents got to try and rein me in on mostly bad business ideas, but all kinds of stuff. And went off to college and wanted to find kind of what I thought would be the best skill set to be an entrepreneur. So I got an accounting degree and an information systems degree, thinking, okay, this is going to be the best skill set. And then I went as far away as you can possibly go from entrepreneurship. At least a lot of people, their initial reaction is like, that sounds as far away as you can go. I did a fellowship at the board that writes all the US accounting standards. So if you're one of the 89,000 state and local governments or a Fortune 500 company, you have to follow the guidance from these two boards. And that's when I discovered that I was actually unconventional. And from a few different points of view. One, accounting is all about conventions. So people are like, how could you be, I'm a CPA as well. Don't hold that against me. Like, how could you be a CPA? I own a CPA firm. That's one of my businesses, and be unconventional. Isn't accounting like the definition of conventions?
Yeah.
I did not fit in this at this fellowship. I was like I stood out. And for a bunch of different reasons. There were 7 of us that were doing this fellowship that were picked from all the top accounting programs in the country. And the other 6, their parents were like the top cardiologist in the world, the CFO of a major insurance company. They got BMWs when they graduated college. Yeah, so I'm the first person in my family to go to college, like across the board. I did not get a BMW when I graduated. I had a Honda Civic, which I paid for, and I worked 30 to 40 hours a week living from home. So I was just not the profile of the other kind of 6 folks that were in this program. And at the end of the program, it was kind of an accelerator. It's the closest equivalent would be finishing law school and then clerking for the Supreme Court. Oh. It's a fast track to be a partner at a massive CPA firm. One person they made partner in that I know of 2.5 years. Typically it's 13 to 15 years to make partner. But the thing is you work on the accounting standard that you helped create for like the rest of your career. And you go in as a very, very specific group, usually in New York or Chicago. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm going to move back to Seattle. And I'm going to be, I'm turning down all of those jobs. I worked on the most complex standard out of the 7 of us as well. And I'm going back to Seattle, and I'm eventually going to be an entrepreneur. And everyone's like, what are you doing? And kind of at every step of the way since I've kind of, when everyone's going right, I've kind of veered left.
And so where are you now?
Where am I physically now?
Well, you have the CPA firm, and
Yep.
and so you achieved entrepreneurship. You own your own firm, And what kind of clients are you serving? And what I feel like you're doing something else. Like you have the CPA firm, and it feels like there's an and.
Yeah. So I left the fellowship. I moved back here,
Mm-hmm.
and I changed jobs like every 2 years. People kept hiring me because they're like, "Oh, Dan seems like a smart guy. He's got all these credentials and everything." So I worked on some corporations that had $100 billion or more in investable assets. I worked for a Warren Buffett-backed company where I was supposed to try and convince Warren to fire a company that he owns. That didn't work out well. I worked for this guy, Steve Loudon, in strategic finance. He went on to kind of become the CFO of Roku. And I kept taking these like slightly different jobs in the accounting, finance, business space because I was conflicted. Again, first person in my family to go to college. I'm making more than my parents ever have. Wanting to stretch my entrepreneurial itch, but at the same point, like, well, maybe I have this great resume now. Maybe I should take this job. And so I kept being frustrated. I would be someone's best employee for like the first 90 days, and then I would get bored, and I'd kind of figure out how to skate by. And finally, I realized 15 years ago that there was an opportunity to do something different in the CPA space. And it would marry my skill set and allow me to scratch that entrepreneurial itch. And what I realized was that at the time, and still largely true to this case, small business owners, individual taxpayers weren't really getting any strategic advice. They weren't learning how to do strategic planning on their taxes. They weren't learning that the most important financial statement is the balance sheet, not the profit and loss statement. They weren't really learning about how the game is not necessarily to grow revenue. The game is to grow your net worth so that you can fund the life that you want. 82% of small business owners go out of business because of cash flow problems, not because of necessarily revenue problems. They might have grown their revenue year after year, but they're often in a worse financial position, even though they grew their revenue, because they don't know how to look at and examine their balance sheet. So we start doing really high level planning strategy for small business owners to show them how to capture the tax savings and build a business where they can scale their net worth. And through that process, I had to unlearn almost everything that I learned in business school.
So now you have a firm that is a CPA firm, but also consults and work with small business owners and entrepreneurs and people helping them do this. Is this your primary service you offer now at this point?
That's right. Yep. I have a CPA firm called Nth Degree CPAs that does all the strategic tax planning, tax preparation, bookkeeping, financial planning. And then I have some separate businesses. One is a news-based site called Certainty News, where we syndicate content to about 1 billion monthly active readers. And I use that to kind of broadcast things that I'm interested in. And then I have a new company called Unconventional Wealth. And we are launching really 20 years worth of my own research on what I call the 5 wealth types. So for my research, there's 5 ways that people approach their wealth. And so we have an assessment that's launching next week that will tell you what your wealth type is. Are you a hustler? Are you a gambler? Are you an optimizer, a saver, or an avoider? And based off your wealth type, we tell you the 5 things, the 5 rules that you need to implement right now to grow your net worth, and then give some resources and things to support people in playing their game, playing their style of business based off their natural wealth type.
So that's exciting. So what would you say, is there an industry you serve the most, or a kind of specific kind of customer that just tends to be drawn and attracted to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've never done the niche thing in terms of a specific industry. That's always confounded me a little bit, to be honest with you. because I know a lot about concentration risk and other, like, hey, all my clients are restaurants, and if restaurants are closed down, my business is shut down. So I've always been a little bit confounded by some of the ways that people are coached to find one very, very narrow niche. I've always done it more based off psychographics and demographics. So my typical client has a $1 to $10 million a year business and revenue. They're probably have an undergraduate degree. Oftentimes they have an advanced degree as well, a master's or PhD. So they're pretty technical. They might be the best in their industry. And they're trying to figure out, why am I still not getting the results that I want? I've done all the research. I'm reading. I'm in all the masterminds. Why am I? And they're out kind of seeking this like missing piece of information that they feel like is limiting them from really growing their business or living the lifestyle that they want.
Sure.
And often they would be what I would call a purpose-driven entrepreneur. And I don't mean that in the religious sense necessarily, that they ultimately believe that their business and their investments exist to serve them in living the life that they want. So they're not necessarily just trying to 10x their business for some arbitrary reason. There's something more than that is important to them.
Don't the businesses that are 1 to 10 million typically have an on-staff salary paid CFO that's supporting them, or is because I would have imagined when you first started talking about entrepreneurs, that people were making 100 to 500,000, haven't hit the million yet, but are trying to figure out how to do it, would need the kind of services that you're talking about really badly.
Yeah, we do serve a lot of folks in that space.
Like workshops or group coaching or something like that.
Right. Yep. The 1 to 10 million don't typically have an on-staff accountant or CFO unless they are very high volume, maybe like a restaurant that's got a ton of transactions and where the outsourcing and bookkeeping could be really potentially expensive or perceived to be expensive. Typically, I see it in the 15 million in revenue plus level where they hire someone there. And that's typically because at that point they've run into enough problems that they realize, like, hey, I probably should value preventing bad things from happening as much as I'm trying to chase revenue.
Right. So what's a tip you could give everybody watching today?
There's so many that come to mind, but the one that I really want to emphasize today is chasing what I call asymmetric risk. Is that something you're familiar with, Jessica?
It sounds brilliant, so tell us all about it.
It's a technical sounding word, asymmetric risk. And again, 82% of small business owners fail because of cash flow issues. If we dig in deeper and we look at the extremes, the billionaires or the companies and individuals who have really had extreme success, and we look at the extreme failures, there tends to be at least one thing in common, which is those businesses that were home run type opportunities. They identified an opportunity that had asymmetric risk, significantly more to the upside, significantly more upside than downside. Jeff Bezos has this quote out there about how he'd make a bet. I'm paraphrasing it, but it's a version of, if you told me that I had a 1% chance of making 100x, I would do that, and I do that deal every time. And that is not what small business owners do. They often take bets where the downside is worse than or equal to the upside. So they'll bet the farm on Facebook ads, and that if it hits, they're going to get their money back and say a couple $1,000s a month in additional revenue. But if it fails, they can't afford to pay their staff, can't afford to pay their bills. So and of course, Facebook ads can be wildly successful. So I'm not saying that's not the case, but oftentimes it's, what am I going to get in return for this? Not a whole lot. But hey, if it doesn't work out, I'm going to be in a lot of pain in the next 30 days, 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not how you win. Most entrepreneurs have an element of their personality that it's a gambler mentality. Now, some are the full gambler wealth type. But when you're a gambler, you know that the casino wins more times than not. And so you better be pretty skilled at it if you're going to make a lot of bets. So we know if we're not, like, over time, we're probably going to lose quite a bit of money. And entrepreneurs will say things like, hey, I fail more times than I don't. So they know that. They know that they're failing more often than not. But yet they continue to make these bets, these investments. I consider any investment you're making in your business a bet. And so it better have a pretty significant possible return. Otherwise, don't do it, because resources are scarce. Now, I think you already understand this concept, Jessica. Can I tell you why?
Why?
Because before we started recording, you said, we were talking about how long does this interview last? Like, well, 90 minutes is blocked off because sometimes we have other guests, and I want to leave options open because maybe something that can't be foreseen happens and we need the full 90 minutes. To me, that's understanding that there's trade-offs and that we have to leave space for the magic and the opportunities to avail itself. So you're creating an opportunity for you to avail yourself to asymmetry to the upside.
Yes.
But that's, again, not what most people do. They schedule themselves so tightly.
Yeah.
They don't realize how scarce every resource is. And there are infinite trade-offs. So when you tie up your time, when you tie up your money, you're leaving an infinite number of other things you could have been doing. And so you miss out. You tie up your money in something that's going to get you a 10% return. And consequently, the opportunity that's going to get 100x, you can't participate in because you don't have the money. You don't have the time. You didn't even have the energy to even see the opportunity because you were too oversubscribed.
Well, I do like, being cautious and planning, but I'll have to say, I will professionally disagree with resources are scarce. Time. I feel like time and money and resources are extremely abundant. I think it's just about, how you're drawing that to you, how you're planning, and having good people like you so that the money really has a strategy and a plan, is something I've done. So a lot of people have talked about the who, not how. And I just love that book because, what I've done to mitigate the risk factor is make sure I'm pulling together a lot of those people in my life, people like you who are brilliant at what you do, so that I can, first of all, live this abundant mentality and lifestyle, as well as, and have success with it, with very little risk, right? With more on the positive, this is going to work, than on the negative, it's not going to.
Yeah, I hear the pushback, and I think there's some nuance there that we're not necessarily disagreeing. I think there's a difference between having an abundance mindset, which I absolutely share with you, and recognizing that there are trade-offs.
Yes, there are trade-offs. Yeah.
So when you put your energy into a toxic relationship, for example, then you're missing out on a much better life. And so the trade-off, it exists. When you put your money into a bad investment and you stay in it, because of a bunch of biases, instead of recovering that, right? You're missing out on all this upside.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right about that. If you fill up your hands with things that aren't serving you, then your hands are full, right? And you can't do so. So I would totally agree with that. So I didn't mean to be argumentative.
But we're having a healthy time.
Just got to feel like there's so many resources out there, and I think I talk to and I speak and I do so much where I'm constantly facing people who just believe there's no money out there. And I just, there's so much money out there.
There is a lot of part of my research and approach and things I teach people is recognizing our biases.
Yeah.
And some people are very controlled by recency bias and loss aversion. And so there's this quote from Virginia Satir, and she says, people prefer the certainty of misery over the misery of uncertainty.
Thanks.
And in other words, like, I would stay in something bad. Like, I'm going to stay in this investment because maybe someday I'll make it back, because that's more comfortable to me than getting out of this investment and finding something different.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Go ahead. Finish, please.
I was just going to say the best traders in the world, what they do is they understand this kind of resource allocation is what I'm talking about, which is, this investment, this relationship, this agreement with an employee, etc. It's not serving me the way that I intended. So I need to get out of that and reallocate it to something that's going to get back to at least my baseline faster.
I totally agree with that. And you're so right about people staying in their comfort zone. And, even when it's not necessarily the most positive thing for them, because it's difficult to either try something new or they don't know what the next new way to try. And it made me think of Who Moved My Cheese, right? And I heard recently about a book that's called, and I haven't read it yet, I Make My Own Cheese or something like that. Like, I create my own cheese or something along those lines. I'm like, oh, I need to look that book up and read that, because that cracks me up, because that's kind of how I feel. I don't care if you move my cheese around. I'm going to go make my own cheese anyway.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned the book, Who Not How. I'm also a fan of that book. And I think that there's a level before that, which you're kind of speaking to right now, which is you, not who. And what I mean by that is, unless you fix those mindset, biases, etc., you can go out and find a bunch of other who's, but you might destroy all those relationships. We create what we fear.
That's true.
A friend of mine, Laura Catella, texted me that yesterday. We're having a conversation about someone who was kind of getting stuck on some what you might call limiting beliefs. And she's like, we create what we fear. And so unless you get a hold of that and you might run through all these really impactful who's in your life that could solve these meaningful problems.
Right. But you got to work on the most impactful person staring you in the mirror first. So I love that. And we've been through so many tips now. I can't even clearly repeat his tip, because we kind of went off on the tip bandwagon here. No, that's okay. That was my fault too. Italian girls, we have to put our 2 cents in sometimes. I love it. So I want to hear from you. When we started this show all these years ago, we always ask a guest to share with us a cause. So if you're watching, and I know you are, and I'm so grateful you are, that you've hung out with us as we're working through some of these tough things in business that Dan and his team can make so much better for you. Put in the comments the cause that you care about and hit that share button, because we want to inspire people to put time, treasure, and talent to the causes you share, to the cause Dan shares, to something near them, something close to their heart. Let's just inspire together out there someone to do something good. So Dan, if you could share with us a cause that's close to your heart.
Yeah, I want to share a cause. The organization is called Anedden Gives, and it's spelled Anedden for Anedden. And they are a charitable organization that's giving grants to folks who are suffering from infertility. And it's not something that's talked about often, but somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 8 folks trying to get pregnant are struggling with infertility. And I care about it deeply because it was something that my wife and I went through. And so both of our babies are IVF babies, and we were fortunate to be in a position to be able to endure the staggering costs that IVF entails. Staggering cost, and many families don't have those resources. So Anedden Gives is doing some really incredible work.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful.
Really around the world, they have grants here in Seattle, Houston, but also some grants in Africa. And so near and dear to my heart, my wife is on the board, and to me, so many of us have dreamed of. It's like part of our identity. You just kind of assume, if you're someone who wants kids, you just sort of assume at some point it'll happen. And when it doesn't, it is a huge setback. Women in particular who struggle with infertility, they show the second highest level of persistent depression and anxiety. And it doesn't resolve until either they have a child or 7 years. The only cohort of people who show a higher consistent level of depression and anxiety are people with chronic pain. So that means that people with HIV, cancer, these types of disorders, while they show a high, levels of depression and anxiety, those with infertility are even higher than that, because it's such a part of our identity and what we thought was going to happen with our life. So anyhow, I didn't know that till we went through it and was trying to understand what my wife was going through. And so if you know someone struggling with it, often silently try to be there for them and just love them up as much as you can.
And we are so blessed. So my husband had 2, I had 4. We raised each other's 6 together. And pretty much I thought you sneezed in my direction and I got pregnant. And and then we had been together for a number of years and mostly raised the children to be out the door, and decided to try to have one together, thinking it would be easy and fine. Went to the doctors to get all my checkups and see, and they told us that no, I had some damage from some things that had happened, and that it wouldn't be possible without, in the in vitro process, because my uterus was still good, but some other things weren't working correctly. And I cried like a baby. You would think I didn't have one child, we did. We got our appointments and we started saving the money, like you said, and putting it aside specifically for that. And before we even, we had a little miracle, because before we even had our first appointment, we were pregnant. So that was wonderful. So we have the 7 children and almost 8 grandchildren now. And they're the joy of my existence. So what a great cause. So put in the comments the causes you love, hit share, and let's spread some awareness and maybe motivate someone to give time, treasure, or talent to a cause like Dan's, maybe in their community or maybe his specific organization. That would be great. Now we're going to talk about books, because I love books. We're creating the ultimate book list. So by the end of this year, we are working hard to bring 1,000 industry experts to you from around the world. And we are sharing with you, we're building a directory. So get excited of the books that our guests recommend. If you put in the comments books that you recommend and want to be featured, and reach out to us in the directory also as a guest recommendation, we will do that for you too. But you got to put in the comments and you got to reach out to our team. So Dan, a book that inspired your personal life or helped you grow your business, not written by you first.
How to Fly a Horse by Kevin Ashton.
Unconventional Dan. I love it. How to Fly a Horse. Awesome. What's this book about a bit?
It is about the creative process and kind of dispelling the myth around that process. So many of us believe that we are not creative, and we subscribe to this idea that we have to, like Doc Brown from Back to the Future, you got to hit your head on the toilet and then you come up with the flux capacitor. Like there's some moment, so there's all these sort of myths around the creative process, and that you're going to wake up one day and you'll finally write that amazing song. You'll finally have that business idea. But actually, it's not. There's no evidence that proves that one moment is true. It's really a series of doing the work and the process that does culminate in this event. But it's the process that gets you there. And I believe that we're all creative.
Me too.
And unfortunately, depending on your profession, I'm in a profession where we're the butt of most jokes. Right? If you're trying to make a joke about, think about the profession, like a really boring profession, like, accountants. It's like every stand-up. My wife and I went to an improv show on Sunday, and true to form, it was like when they were talking about some boring profession, like accountant. It's like every single time I go to a comedy show or something, it's like, we're the butt of that joke.
You and lawyers, don't forget lawyers. They get their fair share now.
Yeah, different. It's not any more savory. They're like the
The villain of the joke.
yeah, we're like, oh, just a really boring person with no personality whatsoever. Like that's how we're portrayed. But I would actually argue that my time at the accounting board was not much different than being in like a writing room for a TV show. I mean, the outcome was less exciting by any means. No one laughed with what we put together. I mean, they definitely sneered when they saw it. And there was no laughter whatsoever. But I mean, we're literally starting from a blank page. It's like, here's the outcome that we want. Here's some general parameters. Blank page. You got the next year, we've got to scope out this whole thing, write some rough drafts, and so we were creating something from nothing. It's just the topic is not something that most people want to like hear any more details about. So we're all creative in our own ways, and I encourage people to embrace that.
Yeah, you can be creative with numbers. You can be creative with anything. I think so many people get stuck on, oh, I'm not creative because they don't paint or because they don't, dance, or they don't, they get stuck on what does creative mean. And it can mean, like I said, so many things. I love that you shared that book. Now tell us, you're an author, share a book that you have written.
Yeah, so I wrote a book called Rigging the Game.
Rigging the Game.
And it's about kind of my operating system for making better business decisions, better life decisions. And it's just a series of principles and some background on really the reasons why, for my research, people quote unquote fail, and how we have some false beliefs around what it really takes to be successful, and a culmination of a lot of the unlearning that I had to do coming out of a business school and working for some Fortune 500 companies. Most of that stuff does not translate to small business. So I share the reasons why and how you can position things differently.
Would it be a good guide if you're trying to find some of that strategy and that profit growth that you're talking about? Is their book useful for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the book is really about how to get what you want on your terms without compromise. That's really the essence of the book. It's not nefarious in the sense of like people hear rigging the game and people are like, is that something sketchy? No. It's about how to really engineer the life that you want.
Do you do workshops or online courses or programs, group coaching programs, or things to take that smaller business owner through their profit and loss and balance sheet, as you mentioned, is so much more important, and giving them some of the higher level principles of going beyond using QuickBooks, or exactly how to use tools like QuickBooks or QuickBooks to make actually have profit and build and begin tracking and building their net worth, and all these brilliant things you've been speaking about. I find actually very interesting as a business owner. I'm wondering, do you have programs to support?
I do. It's existed under a brand that used to be called Certainty U, but we're about to relaunch as Unconventional Wealth. And so it's kind of a whole suite of learning your wealth type. See, I'm one of those people who actually believes that you should lean into your superpowers, not into your weaknesses. And so if you're a hustler or a gambler, how can you continue to exist in that way but not blow yourself up? If you're an avoider, how can you harness that to your benefit and not always limit your capabilities? And so how do we take those, what I call playing your game, how do we take those tendencies that we have and still allow ourselves to get the outcomes that we want? So wealth types, some tools, some templates that you can implement, and then some trainings, all centered ultimately around leaning into who you are and growing your net worth.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, I guess that was perfect timing question. We didn't even preset that up, people. That was natural. So if
Thank
you're
you.
watching and you're thinking, wait, I'm an industry expert, I'm a very interesting and exciting accountant or CPA, I need to be on this show too. You want to be featured? Can you help someone improve their personal life or grow their business? I think Dan's shown he can do both here. Really great guest for us. And if you're a great guest for us too, reach out to our team and we'll show you how to get on the show, be someone's hero and mine, and introduce us to other industry experts in your community as well. And Dan, I've just had so much fun, with you on the show today, and I hope you've had fun too.
I did for sure. Yeah, really appreciate the questions and the energy and just everything you're doing with the show. So thank you for having me on.
My pleasure. Now, before we say goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, you know what we're going to do. We're going to get them to share with us one final piece of information or inspiration to close us out. What do you have for us?
I'll leave you with this. How can you expect to do something extraordinary if you're conforming to the average?
Don't be average. Put your shine on. Put your unique on. I love it. This is awesome. I am your host, everyone, Jessica Koch. This has been another Profound Professionals, and we look forward to seeing you next time. But until then, I'm going to say choose, decide, and then you're going to commit. You're going to take consistent action. And then you're going to have accountability with data and tracking and measuring. And then you'll be reaching all your goals and dreams. And while you're at it, be kind to yourself out there and be kind to each other. Thank you, Dan. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Take care.